Okay, picture this for a moment. You've got an old man. His clothes are basically rags. He looks thin, worn out. His own family has, well, thrown him out. He's begging, alone. It's a pretty stark image.
It really is, and that's the starting point for the story we're diving into today. It comes from an ancient text, the Dhammapada commentary.
Right, that collection of stories explaining verses from the Dhammapada. Which specific story is this?
This one's called the Parijiṇṇabrāhmaṇaputtavatthu. It translates roughly to the story of the aged Brahman's sons. You find it in the section related to verse 233.
Got it. So our mission today is to unpack this story. We want to follow this Brahman's journey. I mean, how did he end up like that? What happens next? Because there is a twist, right?
Oh, definitely. A big one.
And what can we learn from this specific account? We're sticking strictly to what this text tells us.
Exactly. So let's start with the Brahman himself. He's in Savatthi, and the text makes it clear he's, well, loaded. He has 800,000.
800,000. That's serious wealth in that era. What's his family setup initially?
He's got 4 sons, all grown up, and when they get married, he does something pretty generous. Gives them 400,000 right off the bat.
Wow, okay, so half his fortune split between the 4, presumably, like 100,000 each to start their families.
Seems likely.
Yeah.
Big leg up. But then the turning point comes. His wife dies.
And that changes the family dynamic?
Completely. The sons start to worry. The text says they're concerned he might remarry.
And a new wife, maybe new kids? That would mean slicing the inheritance pie even thinner later on?
Precisely. So they hatch a plan. They decide, we'll take care of Dad, keep the wealth in the immediate family.
Sounds good on the surface, maybe. But there's a catch, isn't there?
They go to him and say, look, give us the rest of your money, the other 400,000, and we promise we'll support you for the rest of your life.
So they want it all now, in exchange for a promise.
That's the deal. And the text specifies he gives each son another 100,000. So that's the initial 100K, plus this 100K, 200,000 per son.
Which adds up to the full 800,000. He gives it all away. He keeps nothing.
Nothing but the clothes he's wearing, according to the text. He trusts their promise completely.
And this lifelong support, how long does that actually last?
Well, with the eldest son, who takes him in first, it lasts a few days.
Days. Seriously, after getting 200,000, that's appalling.
It gets worse fast. The eldest son's wife, she apparently becomes quite cruel. The text paints a picture of her basically yelling at him, why should you get special treatment?
Ouch.
Yeah, and she says something like, we all got 200,000, didn't we? Don't you know the way to your other sons' houses? Really rubbing it in.
So the wives are playing a major role here, just like the sons originally feared about a potential stepmother. The irony.
Exactly. So the Brahmin, he's understandably angry, hurt. He leaves the eldest son's house.
And tries the next son.
He does. He goes to each of the other sons, one by one. But the text is blunt. He gets the same treatment. Driven away from every single door.
Completely abandoned by all 4. What does he do then? Where does he go?
He's got nowhere. No home, no money. So he becomes what the text calls a white-clad ascetic. Basically, he renounces worldly life and starts begging for food to survive.
A total fall from grace. From immense wealth to that. How does this affect him physically?
The text is quite graphic. It says, because the poor food, he gets begging and sleeping rough. He becomes old. His body is wasted. He's weak. He's described as wretched, with wretched covering. Just miserable.
A truly desperate situation. So in this lowest point, does he have a moment of clarity? Who does he think of?
He reflects, yeah. He sees his sons gave him nothing, no support at all. And then he remembers someone. He remembers the ascetic Gautama.
The Buddha.
Yes, the Buddha.
Yeah.
He recalls him as being, approachable, kind, good at making people feel welcome. A stark contrast to his sons.
So he sees a glimmer of hope there, maybe. A source of kindness.
It seems so. He decides to go see him. The text says he sort of tidies up his rags as best he can, picks up his beggar's bowl and staff, and makes his way to where the Buddha is.
Just walks in looking as wretched as he felt. How does the Buddha receive him?
With kindness. The Buddha greets him, but immediately sees his state, right? And asks him point blank, why do you look so miserable?
Beating around the bush. And the Brahmin just tells him everything.
Pours out the whole story. How his 4 sons, egged on by their wives, took his money and it kicked him out.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting. The Buddha's response isn't what you might expect, like just offering comfort. What does he advise?
It's quite strategic, actually. The Buddha teaches him some specific verses. And then he tells him, learn these well, and then go to an assembly, a big gathering where your sons will be present, and recite these verses publicly.
Whoa. public shaming, essentially, using poetry. What's in these verses? What's the message?
They are powerful
Yeah.
and pretty cutting. The first one basically says, I looked forward to joy from the sons I raised, but urged by their wives, they drive me off like dogs chasing away a boar.
Like dogs chasing a boar. That's incredibly harsh imagery. Comparing his own sons to aggressive animals.
It is. And it doesn't let up. The next verse calls them demons in the guise of sons. They might call him father, but their actions are demonic, abandoning him in his old age.
Demons in the guise of sons. That really hits hard at the betrayal, the hypocrisy.
Then there's another analogy. He compares himself to an old, worn-out horse. Once it can't work anymore, it's put away from its food, discarded. He says he's like that horse, the old father of these foolish sons, forced to beg.
Used up and thrown away once his wealth was gone. That's bleak.
And the final verse makes a really stark point. He says, basically, a staff is better than these sons.
A walking stick. Better than his children.
Yeah, because he lists what a staff does do. It wards off wild animals, gives support when it's dark, helps you cross deep water, helps you get up if you stumble. It provides reliable, practical support.
Things his sons completely failed to offer. It frames their failure in such a clear, functional way. Okay, so the Brahmin learns these verses. He's got his instructions. What happens next?
He waits for the right moment. A day when there's a big assembly of Brahmins. He knows his sons will be there, probably dressed up, showing off their status.
Setting the stage.
Right. He walks into the middle of this gathering, raises his hand, says he wants to recite some verses, and just belts them out, standing there for everyone to hear.
Wow. In front of all their peers, the whole community. How do the sons react? Is it just embarrassment?
It's way beyond embarrassment. There's a crucial detail the text adds here. Apparently, at that time and place, there was a custom, maybe even a law,
Yes.
that anyone who lived off their parents' wealth, but then failed to support them in their old age, could be killed.
Killed. That's
Yeah.
extreme. Capital punishment for filial neglect.
Seems so. So when the sons hear their father reciting these verses, laying bare exactly what they've done in front of everyone, and implicitly invoking this deadly custom,
Yeah.
they're terrified, utterly terrified for their lives.
Okay, that explains the reaction. What do?
They immediately throw themselves down at their father's feet,
Mm-hmm.
begging him to spare them, pleading for their lives.
And the father, after everything, how does he respond in that moment?
The text says he had a soft heart. Even after all the cruelty, his immediate reaction is compassion. He actually speaks up to the crowd, asks them not to kill his sons. He tells the assembly, they'll support me now.
He forgives them right there. But what about the crowd and that custom?
The people aren't quite ready to let it go that easily.
Yeah.
They turn to the sons and issue a very clear warning. They say, essentially, okay, your father asks us not to kill you now, but if you fail to take proper care of him from this day forward, we will carry out the sentence. We'll kill you.
So it's a suspended sentence, basically. The threat is still very real. It's the public shaming, the deadly custom, and the father's unexpected mercy all hitting them at once.
Exactly.
Okay.
A powerful combination.
Sure.
And it works. The son's behavior changes instantly.
How so? What do?
They are clearly frightened. They don't even let him walk home. They pick him up, carry him themselves, seat him on a comfortable couch. They anoint him, bathe him, give him the full treatment. Then they call their wives, lay down the law. You will care for him properly from now on, or else. And they start feeding him well. Delicious food, the text says. The kind of comfort and care he hasn't had since before they kicked him out.
What a turnaround. From begging in rags to being carried home and pampered. How does the Brahmin physically respond to this sudden change?
With good food, proper rest, he bounces back quickly. The text says he rapidly regains his strength, his vitality. He looks and feels much better.
And does he recognize why this change happened?
Oh, absolutely. He has a clear realization. This whole recovery, this turnaround in his life, it's all thanks to the advice of the ascetic Gautama, the Buddha.
He feels a debt of gratitude.
Immense gratitude.
Yeah.
So much so that he takes a pair of valuable cloths, a significant gift, and goes back to the Buddha. He presents them as acharya wealth.
Like a teacher's fee, acknowledging the Buddha's role.
Exactly. A payment for the invaluable teaching that saved him. And the Buddha, acting out of compassion, accepts the gift.
Does the interaction end there?
No, the Buddha then teaches him the Dhamma, the core spiritual teachings. And this is significant. At the end of that teaching, the Brahmin attains a major spiritual milestone. He becomes a Sotapanna, achieving the fruit of stream entry.
So fixing his worldly problem directly led to his spiritual awakening. That's profound. And does he express his gratitude in other ways?
He does. He tells the Buddha, look, my sons are giving me 4 meals a day now. It's more than I need. I'd like to offer 2 of those meals to you every day.
Sharing his newfound abundance, how does the Buddha respond?
He praises the Brahmin for this meritorious thought and says, essentially, I will go where I am welcome. He accepts the offer.
Which means the Buddha will now be visiting the family regularly.
That's the setup. The Brahmin goes home and tells his sons, the ascetic Gautama is my friend now. He'll be coming for 2 of my meals each day. Make sure you treat him with respect. Don't be negligent. And the sons, perhaps still wary of that public assembly, agree readily.
So the Buddha starts making house calls.
Pretty much. The next day, the Buddha goes to the eldest son's house for the meal offering. He's welcomed respectfully, given good food. Then the next day, he goes to the second son's house, and so on. He visits each of the 4 sons' homes in turn over the following days, and they all treat him properly.
It seems the change in the sons is sticking, at least outwardly. They're honoring their father's wishes regarding his teacher. Does this lead to anything more?
It does. Sometime later, there's a family celebration planned. The eldest son actually asks his father, who should we honor at this event?
And the Brahmin says,
Without hesitation, my friend, the ascetic Gautama.
So they decide to invite the Buddha and his followers.
Yes. The eldest son arranges it, inviting the Buddha and 500 monks for the following day. The Brahmin himself extends the formal invitation.
500 monks. That's a huge event at the son's house.
A major affair.
Yeah.
The house is decorated, everything's prepared. The Buddha arrives with his large retinue. The Brahmin personally seats the Buddha and the monks.
And the sons serve the meal.
They do, serving delicious food. And there's an interesting moment during the meal. The 4 sons make a point of sitting near the Buddha.
Why? What did they do?
They seem, well, proud. They gesture towards their father, who's clearly looking healthy and well cared for now. They tell the Buddha essentially, see, we are taking care of him. We're not negligent anymore. They want his approval.
They're showing off their good behavior, the results of his intervention. How does the Buddha handle that?
He acknowledges it, yes. He praises them, saying that supporting your parents is the right thing to do. But then he adds something important. He says this practice, caring for parents, it's what wise people did in ancient times too.
Setting it in a larger context of tradition and wisdom.
Exactly. And to illustrate this point, he tells them a story from one of his own past lives. He tells them a Tuposaka Nagatutaka.
Ah, a Jataka tale. And this one is, interestingly, Jataka number 233, the same number as the Dhammapada verse, connected to the Brahman's original story.
That's a neat connection, isn't it? This Jataka is about an elephant named Dhanapalaka. The Buddha even recites a key verse from it for them.
What's the verse?
Dhanapalaka by name, an elephant fierce, hard to restrain, though bound, eats no fodder. The elephant remembers the Nagavana.
Okay, let's break that down. Who was Dhanapalaka?
He was a magnificent elephant, captured from the beautiful forest called Nagavana, the elephant forest, to serve the king Akasi. Fierce, hard to restrain refers to his wild nature, especially when he was in must, that state of heightened aggression. He was powerful.
And though bound, eats no fodder. What does that mean? He wouldn't eat because he was tied up.
Not quite bound as in tied, but bound to the stable. Even when brought into the fancy royal elephant stable, decorated, offered the best food, he refused to eat. He just wouldn't take any food in this new environment.
Why? Which leads to the last line. The elephant remembers the Nagavana. He was homesick for the forest.
It was deeper than just missing the place, according to the way the Buddha explains it, through the commentary tradition associated with his Jataka. Yes, he remembered the forest, but specifically, he remembered his mother was still back there.
His mother.
Yes, and she was suffering, blind and alone, missing him terribly. His refusal to eat wasn't just sadness or protest. It was driven by his memory of his duty, his dharma, to care for his blind mother. He couldn't fulfill that duty stuck in the king's stable. Remembering the Nagavana meant remembering his filial obligation, which was tied to being in the Nagavana.
Wow. So the elephant's pining wasn't just for freedom. It was for his mother, an act of deep devotion. How did the people listening react to this story? The sons, the daughters-in-law, the Brahmin?
The text says the story had a profound effect. As the Buddha related this tale of the elephant's unwavering filial piety, everyone listening, their hearts already softened, perhaps by their own recent experiences, began to weep. They listened intently, moved by the elephant's devotion.
That emotional connection, that shared feeling, it probably made them very receptive.
Exactly. The Buddha recognized this. Seeing they were ready, open-hearted, he then taught them the core of his message, the Four Noble Truths. He laid out the fundamental Dhamma for them.
And what was the final result for the family after hearing this ultimate teaching?
This is the truly remarkable part. At the end of that discourse, the text says, not only did the Brahman solidify his earlier attainment, but his 4 sons and the 4 daughters-in-law, the very women who initially drove him out, they all attained the fruit of stream entry. Sotapati.
The entire family, even the wives, that's incredible.
The whole unit reached that first stage of irreversible spiritual awakening together.
From abandonment and utter despair through public confrontation, reconciliation driven by fear and custom, leading to gratitude, further teaching, and finally, this shared spiritual transformation for everyone involved. It's really quite a journey detailed in this text.
A complete turnaround, impacting everyone. It highlights the potential for change, doesn't it?
It really does. And thinking about this deep dive, it's fascinating how many elements came together. You had the Buddha's clever strategy using the verses and public shaming, leveraging that specific, harsh local custom about parental support. You had the father's surprising capacity for forgiveness right in that critical moment. Then, the power of the Jataka story tapping into ancient ideals of duty. And finally, the direct teaching of the Dhamma. All these external pressures and internal shifts seem to converge. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How much of profound change, like we see with this entire family, relies on that perfect storm, the interplay of social pressure, timely wisdom, emotional resonance, and maybe, just maybe, a genuine readiness within people to finally hear the truth? What does that combination tell you about how transformation really happens?